Hi everyone, my name is Brad and I vlog on the Name Investing Doc. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about terminating an agreement between a nurse practitioner and the practice, what went wrong, and how I can learn from it as a business owner. Follow along with me. I don't want this vlog to turn into me bashing this nurse practitioner. Instead, I think I'm going to focus more on what I learned from setting this person up to not succeed in this clinic and what I can do in the future to help mitigate that risk going forward with all my future hires. For those of you that have been following my blog for a while, you know that I opened a second location about 1.5 years ago. And I really did that for two reasons. The first one is that insurance companies will no longer negotiate with you unless you're large enough or you're growing in size. So I really needed the second location to help argue with insurance companies to basically make more money. The second reason is that I can't get on certain insurance plans as in-network if it's closed to new providers. I know it sounds crazy, but there are some insurance plans that'll say, look, we have enough physicians with your specialty in this zip code or this area. We don't need you. Opening a second location in another zip code that had a higher need of this type of specialty allowed me to get both of my practices in with these two insurance companies that previously told me no, they're closed to all new membership. So it was kind of a back way of getting into their program. There's a lot of discussion about APPs, advanced providers, such as nurse practitioners or physician's assistants, and practicing somewhat independently without extreme supervision. Now, because of the distance between these two clinics, that is right. I am not on site 24/7 at this other clinic location. I am always available day to day for backup for them if they have any questions, concerns, and sometimes I'll even Skype in with them. In my argument as to why I agreed to this, yes, there were benefits for me, but there were also benefits for them. They live in the middle of nowhere. It's essentially 30 minutes to an hour away from the local next clinic that's nearby. And I would like to think that physician extenders, such as NPs or PAs, this is kind of exactly what they were meant to do. They're in the middle of a geographic location that no physician apparently wants to be in. They live there, there's a need there, and they want to practice there. I also worked with them for a couple of years in the hospital, so I knew that they were seasoned, they weren't brand new, they practiced good medicine. That was my argument, at least for justifying why I was able to go down this road and set up this agreement at the second location with these two NPs. Everyone who owns their own practice or starts up a new practice, or any business for that matter, knows that there's a ramp-up process. And although I kind of explained this ramp-up process to them, it's different when you see it versus when you experience it. I still remember those first days when I opened up my doors here, and that very first week, I didn't even have one patient per day on my schedule. And I think it took me about 2 weeks to get there where I was so excited I had at least one patient per day on my schedule. That ramp-up process is extremely terrifying, though, because you don't have your name out there, you have no income coming in for months, and you have no idea how this is going to go. So although I tried to tell them about the ramp-up process, I think once they started experiencing it, they had the same fears that I did. So I offered these nurse practitioners two different types of employment contracts. One was a flat salary plus incentives. Those contracts had a lot of nitty-gritty details in it about you really need to see this many patients, have this many billable encounters over the course of 2 years before you can get these other types of bonuses or quarterly bonuses along the way. The other option was that I told them, hey, if you take the risk off my plate and if you take a revenue-based contract only, you get paid whatever you bring in minus overhead and my medical director salary, then I will make that medical director salary a lot less because you're minimizing my risk. And you're taking that off my plate. And they both opted for that type of contract. Again, I tried to highlight to them, it might be months until you're making money. And they both, relayed an understanding. And I figured, let's give it a try. Let's see how this goes. Right off the bat, there were some issues starting to brew. One of the nurse practitioners was ramping up very fast, was taking probably 2 months before they had about 8 patients a day on their schedule. The other one was struggling to get 8 patients a week on their schedule. I think that the nurse practitioner that we ultimately terminated the agreement with, I think they were in a very tough spot. They were hoping for a ramp-up process. The ramp-up was a lot slower than they hoped for. Their colleague was ramping up much, much faster than they were, and the money wasn't rolling in. We all have bills to pay. We all have mouths to feed, whether it's just ourselves or if we have a family beyond that. And I can't fault this nurse practitioner for getting antsy as to saying, where's the money? So this person was in kind of a catch-22. They started doing locums every other week to supplement the income, but then that meant that they weren't in the office making any money working in the clinic. So yet again, income continued to dwindle lower and lower and lower. I think as part of the pressure cooker, we decided to switch medical records as we're opening a third location soon. And our current medical record it just can't grow with us. It's not scalable. It's really only meant for one location. So trying to open 3 locations with a medical record that's really meant for 1 or 2 providers and only 1 location, it was clunky. We have 5 different ways. We had a way to text patients. We had an email reminder for appointments as a totally different system, a different portal, a different payment portal. Then they had their patient portal, which is through the EMR. It was complicated. We had literally like 5 different systems because none of it could work together with multiple different locations. Of course, there's a lot of stress switching medical records. If you're not in the medical industry, it's terrible. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And I kind of told them ahead of time, we're switching medical records. I didn't tell them which one we were switching to until I made the decision, this is the one we're going with, which looking back, I could have been a little bit more transparent in that search for it. But again, didn't want to bury them in the details of everything that was going on. So this person was on Locums. I gave them all these emails about watch these training modules, make sure you're set up. I gave them contacts for my office manager, make sure you can prescribe before you go into the clinic. Turns out they walked into the clinic, they did none of that. They didn't look at any of the training modules, they didn't set up prescription authority, they didn't do anything. And I think that's on me that my office manager and I should have micromanaged that person to say, hey, you didn't do your training modules because I can see if they actually did them. And hey, you didn't set up your prescription authority. So when you walk into clinic the following week, it's going to be a disaster. So this nurse practitioner walked into clinic and it went as well as you could imagine. They had 2 patients on the schedule and they called us extremely irritated. We tried to kind of quell those fears. That same day, we got everything up and running. We kind of did a Zoom walkthrough on how to actually navigate the medical record, tips and tricks basically for them not watching any of these training modules. I just did a quick rundown on what he should know. By day 5, things were getting pretty toxic. This nurse practitioner, again, had 1 patient on his schedule, was slow to ramp up. I think he was probably very frustrated at no money, no people on the schedule, couldn't work the EMR. And unfortunately, he just started calling our office, cussing out my billers as where's his money at? Why isn't he getting paid? We tried to explain to him, you're not getting paid if you're not seeing any patients. It's that simple. It's in the contract. Then he started calling my office manager, made her cry because he started cussing her out, and even started calling my front staff and started making them cry, cussing them out, even though they had nothing to do with it. He also started blowing up my phone, basically calling, texting me about why this is such a failure. I tried to politely say, hey, it's a tough situation. We're all in it together. It is getting better. Watch the training modules. I think at the end of that day, as the dust settled, the other nurse practitioner that was there could feel the tension, called me and said, hey, what's going on? I didn't want to basically get into he said, she said kind of thing. So I said, look, I love working with you. We've got to reevaluate this whole condition on what's going on here. That nurse practitioner felt it would be best if they terminated the agreement and left, and we had a 90-day clause on that. And I told the nurse practitioner, I was very polite about it. And I said, look, I understand your frustrations. Yes, the transparency could have been better on our end. But at the same time, I felt like there were some things like not watching training modules that they also could have done a little bit better as well. Ultimately, I ended up waiving the 90-day because if they're unhappy, they're not seeing any patients, it's just costing me money to have them in the medical record. So I told them that they can leave whenever they want. If they want to do 24-hour heads up, that's fine. They really have very minimal panel and it would be easy to shift it to someone else. I think that the big part here is what can I learn from this? And as I open up a 3rd clinical location, the big learning takeaway for me is that although people will kind of look at these contracts and say, wow, I want to make more money, and the idea of you taking less pay out of my paychecks to put money in my pocket as a revenue-based model only, it doesn't work that well for a lot of people in practice. If the ramp up is slow, if that person's a little bit more on the anxious side, or if that person just really doesn't like the fluctuation of the business of medicine, they're probably going to do better with a contract-based flat salary plus incentives. And I don't know if I'll ever write for a revenue-based contract ever again right off the bat. I think it'll probably be a flat salary plus incentives. There's a lot of people who have a lot of bills coming in. And for our 3rd location, I want to make sure that that individual who takes the contract feels like they're secure in their job. And that I also am taking some of that leverage and saying, look, I'm taking a lot of this risk, but of course that's going to mean that I'll make more profit by giving them less money in terms of revenue per patient seen. The business of medicine is tough and there's learning aspects along the way. I really am going to miss working with that nurse practitioner. I think he is a wonderful, wonderful provider. I think that the practice of medicine is wonderful. I think that it was just a pressure cooker and situation that just set this person up for not success. And honestly, I really do regret that. I like this person. I wish them the best going forward. I think that I made my mistakes along the way. They made theirs as well. And I wish they would have been a little bit more professional about it rather than making half my staff cry. But it is what it is. I hope y'all enjoyed the post. Have a nice week. See you next Monday.